Lord knew what he was doing, and he put us on a path because I just would have been so scared and so nervous of jumping in, earlier than we did. And now looking back, I know what I would have done differently. It's been okay. And we're doing really good. And I can see it has really, laid a mark, and we've been able, just our family and our time, and the amount of time we have with them is fleeting. And it's finite. Of course, they're always going to be our kids, but when they're just this family unit that we have here and now is only here for a limited time before they go out into the world. And I want to make the most of every moment, and homeschooling allows us to do that.
Hi, welcome to the Zan Tyler podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Zan Tyler podcast, where our goal is to help you thrive in your homeschool journey. Let me take just a minute to ask you to please subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen or watch, including YouTube. And please leave us a good review if you found the podcast to be encouraging. I'm excited to welcome Elizabeth Pyle to the podcast today. Elizabeth is the homeschool mom of two boys, ages 12 and 13. She has her master's in taxation and is a licensed CPA. In addition to that, and in the midst of homeschooling, Elizabeth and her husband run an IT cloud consulting company from home. COVID gave the Pyles the push they needed to enter the homeschooling arena, and they have never looked back. Elizabeth also serves as a homeschool consultant for Homeworks by Precept. Welcome, Elizabeth. This podcast is brought to you by BJU Press Homeschool. Homeschooling is an exciting adventure we take with our children. One of the most challenging parts of this journey is choosing the curriculum you want to use. BJU Press Homeschool is a curriculum you can trust. All the books, resources, and videos have been designed with you and your child in mind. Their curriculum is educationally robust and rich, taking into account that children have different learning styles, strengths, and needs. Mom, you are in charge. BJU Press Homeschool is here to come alongside and support you. Do you need help with the teaching load, or is there a subject you just don't want to teach? Their amazing video courses are available for all grades and almost every subject. BJU Press Homeschool believes that homeschooling can produce a new generation of students who know God, love their neighbors, and stand firm in their faith. For more information, go to bjupresshomeschool.com. That's bjupresshomeschool.com. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Well, thank you for having me. I am so delighted to be here.
So I want to start off by getting you to tell us just a little bit about your family and how you got into homeschooling.
Oh, okay. So I am married to my husband, Benjamin. We've been married for almost 15 years now, and we have two wonderful children. Zachary is our oldest at 13, and Pearson is our youngest at 12. So they are very close together. And we never had, let me back up. We actually always wanted to homeschool. We actually talked about it. We felt called to do it very young, but however, society sometimes has other plans of what you're supposed to do. And so we didn't really know a lot about it. So we did exactly what you were supposed to do. And we sent our oldest to public school. We live in suburban DFW. There's some great schools here. And unfortunately,
that's Dallas-Fort Worth.
Fort Worth.
For people who may not know DFW.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So Dallas-Fort Worth. And, we have schools right here in our backyard. And unfortunately, my oldest was bullied horrendously in kindergarten, and it is a tragic story. And just the response, or let's say maybe the lack of response, just wasn't what we expected. So the following year, we pulled him out and we put him in a private Christian school. That's right down the road. It was small, and I'm publicly educated all the way from kindergarten to my master's degree. So it was good enough for me. It would have been good enough for my kids. And I had no idea this whole world of Christian education. Of course, I am a Christian. I go to church, I study, but I didn't understand putting it in the education until they went to private school. And my husband was half and half in public and Catholic school. He's from Louisiana. And we just really my boys thrived. We loved it. I became a teacher up there. And I taught art, music, and PE. So I'm kind of like the fun aunt. I get you for the fun things. I get to send the
That's
students
awesome.
back. But I was also their long-term substitute and their substitute. And that's where I was really introduced to BJU Press and the curriculum.
And so
And
let me stop you for just a minute there. For those of you who don't know, BJU Press Homeschool is the sponsor of the Zan Tyler podcast and produces a fabulous homeschool, a fabulous curriculum for those of us who want to homeschool from a biblical worldview perspective. So,
yes,
all right. So I just wanted to get that
no,
for people who are unfamiliar. I
I
just wanted
love it.
to
Yes.
get
So
that in
that's
there a
where I
little
was
bit.
introduced. And so, COVID came, unfortunately. But we say fortunately in our family because out of this really just dark and kind of strange times for everyone, I got to have my boys home and I was teaching them just one on one. And I realized that I can do this and I enjoy doing this. And I think that was always our hang up was how do you know that they're getting taught what they need to do? How are they going to get this? How are they going to do this? How do you know? And it was just what we needed. So COVID,
What ages were they, Elizabeth, when
they
you
were
brought them home?
in 2nd and 3rd grade.
Okay.
So, yeah, so it was 5 years ago, so probably what, the 7 and 8, and it was just really what we needed. So, I got uh, I knew that I wanted to use BJU Press, and so we got on and we ordered all their curriculum, which is just amazing. And it was sent, and here we are, and we're just loving it, and my boys are loving it. And, it's such a blessing, and we feel so fortunate to be able to educate them in this way.
So tell me a little bit about the first year you homeschooled. Do you feel like you went through any type of adjustment period, or your kids did, or did it just go well from the beginning?
Our Our first year, we were lucky. I mean, I think, of course, you learn what works and doesn't work, but we kinda just went into it, I think because they were at home being schooled, like, before COVID, as part of their school. Um, but we set up a schoolroom. I have a whiteboard. I have desks. FYI, for all new homeschool moms out there, you do not need it. I very rarely use that anymore. We use mostly wherever we kind of land or the kitchen table. But we did that at the beginning. I'm very, type A and just really, thought we wanted it. And we did it, but we learned what worked and didn't work. And, one of, I think, the best lessons for me was I tried to make it as much as like a school, a typical school. Again, like what you think or society kind of tells you that you need to do. And I don't think now, like looking back, if I could tell myself, it doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to do every little thing. You don't have to have a schedule. I mean, I that's one of the big questions, I guess, is what is your schedule when you do? You don't have to have the at 10 to 10:45, we're doing English. Because some days that doesn't work out, or you're rolling around long with pronouns and you're like, let's just do 3 lessons. Because it's all heady. And you have to remember that like the lessons are set up for a school because there has to be time restraints. And that's what, teachers need. But when you're at home and able to be more fluid, you can move that around.
Mhm. Boy, that is such a benefit of homeschooling, and you're right, that first year when you're trying to get your feet on the ground, and I say this for all you new moms and dads out there, homeschooling moms and dads who may have just finished your first year or considering homeschooling for the first time. If you went to traditional school, that is your go-to setting because that's all you know. But as Elizabeth said, the more you homeschool, the more you can really lean in to the flexibility it allows, in terms of scheduling, in terms of just going with it. The 3 lessons on pronouns when everything is right, or your child is writing a paper or doing something creative in art. You don't have to stop because a bell rung.
You don't. And I mean, and if you were to look at my 2nd grade handwriting teacher's edition, You would see highlights and marks up, and, now that I've gotten into it, I realize I didn't need to be that, structured with it that we could learn. But that's what worked for us in the first year. And now we're a lot more fluid. And it's kind of like with anything you do. If you look back for the very first time you did it, you're like, ooh, what kind of you kind of like a new mom. If you looked at my diaper bag for my very first child, I felt like it was like this huge suitcase that I carried everything. My second child, if we just had a bottle of diapers walking out the door, that was good enough. It was fine.
Right, that's right. So you talked a little bit about societal expectations and maybe family expectations or neighbor expectations. How do you feel that has been?
So I find this very interesting because my husband and I talk about this a lot, that everybody thinks that you should do what's like expected. And everybody, you put them in public school. This is what they do. They play sports. They do this. They do that. As much as I watch social media, one person puts them in a summer camp that everybody does because that's what they think they have to do. It's kind of keeping up with the Joneses in a way. And when we pulled ours out of public school, that was a big shock. Not necessarily to our family, some family, but mostly to like our neighbors and like friends, because that's just not what you did. And then I found this world of, like I said, Christian education and private school. And it just really opened in this whole community. And now being homeschooled, there's this amazing community. There's so many of us, and there's so many. And it used to be, I will laugh, like going to the mailbox. Why did you pull them out? Why are you paying for school? This and that. And now my questions 5, 6 years later is, hey, do you have room for one more to come homeschool? I think my child would benefit. That's always the joke. But it is, I get a lot of, how did you start? How do you feel comfortable? You will still get the questions. I think some of those questions are when people just hear the word homeschool, they have to bring up certain things. They just can't help themselves. How are they socialized? How are you do? One of the ones that used to bother me, and it really got to me even after doing this and knowing I wanted to do it and continue doing it, was how are you going to homeschool in high school? It was actually at an appointment, and I was thinking, and it really got to me. And at the end of the day, Zan, when I really sit down and think about it, I graduated high school. Actually, I did
Right. You did
quite
well in high school and
right.
college. That's
I
right.
I have a graduate degree. I think I could probably teach high school. If nothing else, I could probably do the work again and get through it. Okay, I think I can do this because, and I think it just makes us scary. And I think sometimes the unknown is scary. And I still, worry about things with my kids. Would I worry if they were in a traditional school? Yeah, the same worries. So I think that's just part of being a parent.
Well, it's a whole different level of worry, I think, now, sometimes when your children are in an institutional setting. And like you say, you had the bullying to deal with that you never expected in 1,000 years. And questions about your children's faith and all of those types of things. So, at home they're safe.
They're very safe.
And, I think people, when you're doing something different, um, it's one of 2 things. I mean, they really do think you're crazy, or they think I'm crazy, or they feel a little threatened by the decision and, wonder, "Is this something I should really be doing?" And I really don't wanna be doing it.
And I think you're right, because if you think, of all the things that people say, "Oh, I could just never do that. I could never spend the time with my kids." Well, we can. And we're supposed to show our kids. And I love that we're showing our kids that you can do something hard and go against the grain. You don't have to do what everybody else in the neighborhood or town or state is doing. And, you can do what you think is right. And at the end of the day, this is what we feel is right for our children.
What do you think has been the most unexpected good surprise for you with homeschooling, something you never expected to find when you started?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think just how much the one is, and it's really not about my kids, it's about myself, how much I have learned. One of the things with BJU Press Homeschool, which we have chosen, is they teach you the why. And I actually have a master's in taxation, so I have a math background. But teaching my kids math with BJU Press Homeschool has really taught me the why. And I can tell you, all through my school, I never understood the why. Once recently, my son asked, "Well, why didn't you subtract negatives? You add one." And I remember looking at him and going, "Because that's what you do. You just put a plus plus and we move on." And he goes, "But why?" And I sat there and I thought, I would have never ever asked that in any of my public school classes. 1, we didn't have time. 2, you didn't question it. And so I have learned the why behind so much math theory that I have an advanced degree in that I never knew and never even knew that I could question, if that makes sense, because you learned it, this is how you did it, and you moved on. I think it was shocking in 4th grade English when I realized that maybe the way I was writing wasn't always the correct way. My boys laugh at that. I've learned a lot, but how much I have learned and been able to show my boys of, mom didn't know that. And I'm learning that too, and I think that has been really surprising and fun all in the same way.
I do love what you said about how much we really do grow as people when we're homeschooling. The things you learn, the barriers you're confronted with, working outside of your comfort zone, all of and those are all lessons you teach your children in the process too.
You do. You do, and they see that it's not always comfortable, and I, really try to tell them a lot that, I don't always know all the answers. I try to find out. I'm trying to get as much data and, figure it out, but sometimes I don't know all the answers, and that's okay.
I've got a really good friend, Deb Bell, who got her PhD in educational psychology after she finished homeschooling her four. And one of the things she told me is that in a classroom, the teacher generates the questions. But when you're home, you really want your kids to generate the questions. And that's what you're seeing happen. And that's really what we want. We want our kids to be so interested in the material that they're asking the questions. I was online the other night just looking up articles and books on critical thinking for students. And it's amazing the dearth that educators see in the lack of critical thinking skills in our kids, especially with the advent of screen time. And but I think you're so right, and I'll let you comment on this. But BJU Press, that's one of the things that it is so well known for is its ability to lead your children into a path and a habit of critical thinking.
I mean, I can't agree more, and just the why questions, and I feel like it does a really good job of teaching them even how to ask those whys. What is that next question? And I always think that's always the thing. You know the first question to ask, but maybe just those next and those follow-up questions, and it just teaches them, just whether it's a writing prompt or and a math, we were doing math the other day, and I thought it was an interesting question. Do you prefer to use a fraction form or a decimal form? And my husband happened to be walking through, and we all 4 kinda sat down and talked about it, and we have 4 widely different answers, um, all getting the correct answer, but 4 widely different ways to do it, and I was like, "Oh, I never thought about doing that and that was a really interesting just topic to find that we all live in the same house, we do the same activities, but we think very differently."
And, I really do think that's a power point of homeschooling is that kids can develop their own interest. And even if you're looking at the same book, they'll each have different questions and each have different lines of thought or interests that they'll go down, whether it's a literature book, whether it's a living book, whether it's, whatever it is, everybody's going to bring something different to the table and get something different out of a lesson.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, do you put your boys together at the same grade level or are they working independently?
So, we've kinda gone back and forth, a little bit. They are now 1 grade apart, and so we're in middle school, so things were we haven't always, but we have brought them together for, our world history, which has been super fun, and life science this year, and it has been just a blast. We have kinda kept them, but now that we're kinda out of the elementary years and, entering into, middle and high school here, we've kinda combined them a little bit, but even when we are in separately, if there was something that was really interested to one of them, or, like, my oldest loves marine biology, loves fishing, so if my youngest was reading a fishing story, he would be like, "Oh, let's Zachary," and bring him in there, so they've always done that, and we might have crossed projects and worked together, so that has been super, super nice.
That's a lot of fun. I know some of our listeners, if they've listened enough to the podcast, know that I was so overwhelmed. You were talking about high school. I was so overwhelmed with the prospect of high school, and I was really praying about it. And I felt like the Lord was saying to me, I want you to do this in high school. And I mean, I was just so undone because this is the early to mid 90s. There's no internet, there are no video courses, there are no co ops. This was just the day where it was you and your kids, and, but the Lord brought an amazing amount of help to me during that process, but the thing I did that we laugh about now is I just looked at John one day because I had a child who was starting 1st grade, so I was teaching her to read, and then we're starting high school, which totally had me undone emotionally, can I do this? And am I going to ruin them? And by the way, they're all doing very well. Um, so, um, but it really, yeah. So I just looked at John one day, my 7th grader. We were just in the 1st week of school that year. I looked at John and I said, I have an announcement to make. And he said, What's that, Mom? I said, You are now in high school. You are now a 9th grader. And I knew really he was very bright. I knew I could bump him up and figure out the damage later, but it worked out great. So he still graduated 2 years after Ty, but we had a lot of fun the last 2 years of high school doing a lot of traveling. He was an intern with Team Pact. He traveled the United States teaching classes and legislators and did some studies on ecosystems. He was really into science. So, it was really it was a really traumatic time for me homeschooling that the Lord really just gave us an answer and used for good.
And that flexibility of being able to move them, we've kinda done that with my youngest knowing in high school, and I want them to take some of those classes together, so he will take some, I guess, out of order if you think of, like,
Yes,
the
yeah,
thing, so
uh-huh,
they can be more together, but that's okay. It doesn't always have to be that status quo, this is
that's
the way
right.
that you do it.
And that really is one of the glories of homeschooling is the flexibility not only with your schedule, your 9 to 5 schedule or your 9 to 1 schedule or your morning schedule, but also with the way you cover courses year to year. And,
Yes.
I think there's just so many benefits of homeschooling that are not always, just clear to you when you begin or you dive into those the more you dive into homeschooling the more you see of that.
The more I completely agree, and I say, the Lord knew what he was doing, and he put us on a path because I just would have been so scared and so nervous of jumping in, earlier than we did, and now looking back, I know what I would have done differently, but it's been okay, and we're doing really good, and I can see it has really, laid a mark, and we've been able just our family and our time and, really your kids are, older than mine, you understand the amount of time we have with them is fleeting, and it's finite. Of course, they're always gonna be our kids, but when they're just this family unit that we have here and now, it is only here for a limited time, before they go out into the world, and I wanna make the most of every moment, and homeschooling allows us to do that.
Well, speaking of that, which is so true. I mean, I have a grandchild who's graduating from high school this year, and then my next child from homeschool high school is my next grandchild is next year, and it's just I cannot believe. Sometimes I can't believe all my kids are grown and grown, and then I look at my grandkids who and the time flies by, and you do have this sense of wanting to grab the time you're with them because you're always friends, but the 18 years you have with them at home where you're really speaking into their lives in a more concentrated way, it's just a it's just a powerful, sweet time.
It is.
So, one thing I wanna talk to you about is the fact that you're all competitive golfers.
We are.
S so so tell us about that a little bit.
So my husband, was a college golfer. He was very good. He was actually going to turn pro and then, fortunately got injured. And he put that on the back burner for me and the kids. And so, my kids have been competitive golf. They've been playing golf since they were little. And, of course, my husband has been playing. And, the more we would go out there, and as they've gotten older, I was like, well, I'm gonna just competitive enough that I have picked it up. I started playing, and have gotten better. And so every Friday night, you will find us on the golf course with a Friday night scramble before pizza night. We come home and then make homemade pizzas. And so, yeah, my boys play competitively. My husband now is back into playing competitive golf. So we are a big golf family. We love it.
So, do they play through public schools, or how do they play competitively?
So, golf is a kind of a very individual sport, so it works
Mhm.
well for homeschooling. And, so they just play within it's the National PGA Tour, and they have a, North Texas division up here. It's a youth tour, and so they play, tournaments through them. And, so it's very easy. There's lots of tournaments they can do. We take breaks. Right now, we're kinda have, taken a little bit of break, and then we'll start back up here for the summer. So, yeah, it's been fantastic. But, homeschooling is great because we do live in Texas. It's very hot in the summer. We don't stop golf for the summer, but homeschooling, especially when it's hot, we go out and practice early in the morning. We can do later nights. If they have a tournament, we can shift our schedule. We're actually going to watch a tournament here at the Colonial in Fort Worth tomorrow. So we love, being able to get out and put school on pause, or we'll do it at night or on the weekend and move it around for them.
And the glorious thing about that is not necessarily the golf, but it's having a shared interest that you all enjoy doing together. It's such a bonding experience.
It's so much fun. I mean, we love it. One of our favorite things to do is Christmas Eve. They'll have a places or we can play out here where we are locally, and we wear our Santa hats and we go and play, and then we meet up with grandma and grandpa later and do all the Christmas stuff. But we have that, yes, time together. When husband and his brother and his dad would still play when my father-in-law was still alive, and it was just so much fun to go and just have that time together. And you put the phones down and you're just present for 2 to 4 hours while you're out there.
And you're outside, and that's
Yes.
that's another blessing to doing an outdoor sports like that. It's just
Yes.
that time outside together. We when we started homeschooling, my husband played baseball in college, and he just loved baseball. He got injured his freshman year, so never really was able to play after that. But the boys, it was the beginning of the soccer craze in the United States. It's the I guess it's the mid to late '80s, and so Ty really got interested in soccer. So they were desperately in need of coaches, and they knew Joe was an athlete, and they said, "Well, will you coach soccer?" He said, "I know nothing about soccer," but he knew how to kick a ball, and so he was in. And but it was just that it wasn't that it was soccer, although that's what the boys loved, so that was important. It was that time together. You know, it's just so important. And so your thing might be golf. Somebody else's thing, is music. Or my daughter was really into the fine arts and loved community theater. So, we all became involved in that, not on the stage, but behind the scenes, and so what you do as a family often reflects your interest or your kids' interest that you all circle around. And it's sort of like the icing on the cake or the glue that helps hold you together, the fun experiences and that bonding you have together as a family in the midst of academics.
It is. It is. It's so wonderful to just have that time together, to be able to do it, and, learning together, learning the game, learning the rules, you know. It's been wonderful, so
I have a really close friend, really good friend, Dwight Coffin, and he was a homeschool dad, and he was also a lobbyist down at the State House. We had tried forever to get Tim Tebow legislation passed here. So, but his son was one of the number one golfers in the state, and they started homeschooling him in high school. And he said, Dad, I want to play golf. So he went down to the legislature and got that bill passed and nothing flat. And so now the kids in South Carolina who want to, most of them, there's still some problems with the high school league or school districts, but many can play through the school districts. And then others, my nephews are competitive golfers, just choose to play like your kids are playing. And so there's so many opportunities now for kids to do things, 4-H clubs, community theater, and there's homeschool co-ops. People worry about socialization. It's almost like there's too much of it if you take advantage of everything.
it is. I actually, spoke on a workshop on this, and I believe the research is homeschoolers are involved in, I think, 8 extracurriculars outside of the house on
Wow.
average. And so if you
Is that the student or the family?
the student
Wow.
the student.
That's
And so I kinda sat down and I was like, my kids have done 4-H, they've done martial arts this year, we've done, golf. There is church, there
yes.
is they were volunteering every week. I mean, there was so much to do, and if you really think about, our schools are so big that really the students have to pick one thing because there's just not enough for everyone to do more than one, and they get to do all these different activities and, they don't have to stick with it for 4 years if they wanna go explore something else, and they can do it, and it's all because homeschooling and our schedule allows us to do things, not cram it all in from that, 3 o'clock bell till, dinner time. We can do it at different other times of the day.
Well, I know when Lizzie was involved in community theater, sometimes after practices or performances, we'd get home at midnight and she could sleep in the next day. I mean, her
Yes.
schoolwork didn't suffer, but neither did her sleep
Sleep.
schedule.
Mhm.
And the same way with the boys' soccer tournaments. If they just had late games on Friday or Saturday, or we got in from a weekend away, they could recover, still do their schoolwork, but they didn't have to be up at 6 o'clock to stand in line waiting for a bus. I really don't know. My kids couldn't have done near the things they did had they been in a school situation.
Mine either. Mine
You
either.
know,
By the time they're out and like you said, and then the homework and
yes.
just the, time to eat dinner, there's just not a lot of downtime or time at all.
Thank you for joining Elizabeth and me today for part 1 of this 2-part episode. You can find Elizabeth at her website, homeworksbyprecept.com/Elizabeth Pyle, and you can find me at zantyler.com and on social media. Thanks so much for joining us today, and may God continue to bless you and your family as you homeschool together.